Hi, Yannick.
Morning, Rebecca. I
Morning.
just would like to um check um
Yeah, no, you must
my
check it.
camera and the presentation.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
I'm gonna share quickly. It has for some reason been okay. Do you see the presentation slides?
No.
Okay, wait. Please come in.
Yeah, it is.
On full screen.
Yeah, full screen, yes. Yeah, no.
Okay, perfect. I shall stop sharing. I will keep my camera on just for the introductions. Um,
Yeah, same here. Hey.
and then I'm gonna make myself a cup of coffee quickly and then
Okay,
settle in.
cool.
Cool.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, colleagues. It's now 3 minutes to 10 o'clock. We're just waiting for another 3 minutes or so for other colleagues to join, then we'll start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to the Select Committee on Public Infrastructure and the Minister in the Presidency meeting for today, the 30th of October. You're all very welcome in this meeting, and today we'll be dealing with a presentation on the 6th Parliament Select Committee of Transport, Public Service Administration, Public Works and Infrastructure, the Legacy Report. And then we will also do a presentation on the draft 2024-25 Select Committee Annual Performance Plan. And we'll then do some deliberations on the Annual Performance Plan, adopt the minutes of the previous meeting, and that will move us to closure. So without further ado, are there any apologies, Mr. Mthalini?
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, honorable members. So far, Chairperson, I haven't received any apology.
Okay, I'd like to just recognize that I can see Honorable Malakome, Honorable Skeerkogel, Honorable Muimang, Honorable Kolisi, and Honorable Breed. Did I leave anybody out?
Mike Cassini, Chair.
Say
Mike
again.
Cassini.
Honorable Makasini, thank you very much. I recognize you. Great, thank you very much. With that, let's move on to the presentation on the 6th Parliament Select Committee, Transport, Public Service Administration, Public Works and the Infrastructure Legacy Report. Just a note here, colleagues, that Public Service and Administration between the 6th Parliament and the 7th Parliament have moved from Public Works and Infrastructure Committee to the COCTA Committee. But we will still deal with I believe, with their legacy report in this meeting, just for future reference. Honorable Makasini, your hand is up. Is that a legacy hand?
No, Chair. I wanted to submit an apology of Honorable Ceza. He's not feeling well.
Thank you. Can I just request you to get him to submit an apology to my office in writing, if you don't mind? But we note that you've mentioned his apologies in the meeting.
He will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Makasini. Right, let's move on. I'm going to hand over.
Honorable Groenewald, sorry, Chairperson. I'm available. Is Honorable Mabebo here?
Who's speaking?
Honorable Mabebo.
Honorable
Honorable
Magebo, I just see Samsung. So that's Honorable Magebo. Thank you very much. We got you.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Can I just ask for future reference, and it'll just make it much easier if you can all make sure that your devices are named for Zoom purposes in your own name, so that it's easier to do the roll call at the beginning of the meeting. With that, let's move on to the legacy report presentation. Dr. Clark, I'm going to hand over to you and Mr. Mteleni for this, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson and members, for giving opportunity to myself and Mr. Mteleni to present the legacy report of the 6th Parliament Select Committee on Transport, Public Service and Administration, Public Works and Infrastructure. Chair, may I request to switch off my camera for the remainder of the presentation?
Yeah, that's fine, no problem. I'm going to do the same with mine. I see my bandwidth is also a bit low. Thank you.
So the overview of the presentation, today we will look at the purpose of briefing the Select Committee on the Legacy Report, the key statistics for the previous Select Committee, the focus areas for the previous Select Committee, the processing of legislation, oversight visits and study tour, international instruments, recommendations for follow-up and recommendations on the state capture report, and overarching recommendations. So the legacy report contains recommendations for consideration into the oversight program of the Select Committee on Public Infrastructure administered in the Presidency. For ease of reference, I'm going to call that the 7th Parliament Select Committee. So the legacy report will therefore inform the annual performance plan of the 7th Parliament Select Committee to the extent that our current committee agrees to take these recommendations forward. So the portfolio of the 6th Parliament Select Committee includes the Department of Transport and its entities, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and its entities, the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, which does not have any entities, the Department of Public Service and Administration, together with the Centre for Public Service Innovation and the National School of Government, as well as the Public Service Commission, as mentioned by the Chair in the introduction, fell under the 6th Parliament Select Committee portfolio, but it now resorts under our sister committee. The 5-year term for the 6th Parliament Select Committee is here presented through key statistics. So a total of 106 meetings was held over the 5 years. 10 pieces of legislation was processed, and members will notice that the bulk of that legislation was processed in the last 2 years of the term. 3 oversight visits was undertaken, 1 study tour was undertaken, 2 international agreements processed, and during the previous term, the Select Committee did not deal with any statutory appointments, no interventions were considered, and no petitions were considered or rather referred to the Select Committee either. So the 6th Parliament Select Committee Oversight Programme had 6 focus areas. The first of this was the National Development Plan, which falls under the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. So a number of the aspects of the National Development Plan relates to the portfolio of our Select Committee and the previous Select Committee. It, for example, recognizes economic infrastructure and access to public transport as being foundational to social and economic development. And in relation to the Department of Public Service and Administration, an overarching objective of the NDP is that South Africa needs to build a state that is capable of playing a developmental and transformative role. The National Planning Commission briefed the 6th Parliament Select Committee on its 10-year review of the National Development Plan released in 2030. Vision 2030. The underlying measurement criteria for the review as presented to the Select Committee was inequality, unemployment, and poverty. In the Minister's forward to the review, it is acknowledged that these challenges remain and have in some respects worsened. When one looks at the next slide, you will actually see the supporting evidence for the Minister's statement. So I will illustrate with a few examples. So compared to the target of 5.4% GDP growth, for example, only 1.1% GDP growth has been attained by 2022, which is the date at which the NDP did the review assessment. Instead of a 30% investment, that's the gross fixed capital formation, as a percentage of our gross domestic product, instead of the 30% target, only 14.1% was attained at the time that the Planning Commission did the assessment. So that adds the evidence for the Minister's assessment of the progress thus far. The next focus area was on the government property portfolio. The table here illustrates the last conditional assessment that was presented to the 6th Parliament Select Committee. And this is an issue that our current committee has already also taken up, both during the introductory briefings by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, but also in its recent oversight visit to Public Works Infrastructure on our visit week to KwaZulu-Natal. But what you can see here is that a lot of properties fall under the poor or very poor ratings for conditional assessments. Also, 1,791 properties are in fact unutilized, which means that they cannot be used for revenue generating ability. And it's also not available for service delivery purposes. So the Select Committee assessment was that the delay on the parts of organs of state in paying outstanding debts affects the financial viability of the PMTE. And the PMTE reported that the AG's disclaimer of opinion received was as a result of the immovable asset register being submitted late, and that the AG could not undertake the reconciliation necessary for the audit. So this is an example of one focus area when we get to the annual performance plan, where the recommendation is that this is one of the focus areas to be maintained for the current financial year. The next focus area was on smart cities, which is a cross-cutting, multidisciplinary and multi-department issue that the previous Select Committee focused on. So the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure plays a significant role in the planning and development of smart cities against the smart city principles of ease of movement, safety, multi-use, green buildings, and a work-life balance. So the DPWI, their role includes serving on the steering committee that identifies solutions to challenges such as those faced by the Mooikloof Megacity project in Pretoria. And the department at that point had reported that the precinct plan for Salverklop Government Precinct has been completed and that servicing of land and installation of access roads was underway. The Select Committee recommended to the department that it should explore the use of catalytic funding. So that is where departments are able to use out-year funding allocations during the development of projects to unlock the development of smart cities such as Mooikloof in Pretoria, Nkosi City adjacent to the Kruger National Park, Durban Metropolis, and Lanseria Smart City in the Gauteng West Rand. Another focus area that is also recommended for inclusion in our current annual performance plan is a deteriorating rail network and road infrastructure. So in its engagements with the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, the former Select Committee as a standing item requested progress on the refurbishment of identified priority corridors. There was a specific focus on the Central Line in Cape Town, where more than 1,200 households had settled on the railway line. In the most recent appearance before the Select Committee, Presidency had reported that the households had been relocated, paving the way for the line to become operational again. Presidency attributed a lot of the underperformance in recent years, both in respect of the delivery of train sets and the refurbishment of stations, to factors including the impact of COVID-19 restrictions, delays in supply chain management processes, and the unavailability of key components required for manufacturing. The trend, however, continued even after the COVID-19 period. And in the most recent appearance before the previous Select Committee, the Deputy Minister acknowledged that the targets that were not attained are the targets related to service delivery that directly impact on people's lives. In relation to road infrastructure, not all provinces have the financial resources to maintain its provincial roads. And for this reason, provinces ought to be encouraged to engage with SANRAL in respect of the transfer of strategic provincial roads to SANRAL. Provinces are also, to varying degrees, able to spend the road maintenance conditional grants. And the Minister of Transport, in the introduction to the strategic plan and performance plan for the Department of Transport this year, again echoed the reality of that provinces are not always able to spend their road maintenance conditional grants. The next focus area for the previous Select Committee was on integrated public transport networks. The department at that point reported that delays in the implementation of the IPTNs at a municipal level as a result of protracted consultation with taxi operators in respect of the establishment of vehicle operating companies. So members will recall, for example, when we visited the Go Durban project, that was one of the challenges that the municipality also raised. It was also focused on the role of taxi industry in transporting communities. The deadline for January 2023 that had been set for the scrapping of illegally converted panel vans was not met. The department at that point indicated that in consultation with the taxi industry, it had expressed intention to set a date of 2025 as a revised cutoff date for the scrapping of illegally converted panel vans. This is against the backdrop of the fact that a large portion, the figure was given as approximately 40,000 of the taxis initially identified for the recapitalization project did not have valid operating licenses, which was a requirement for the recapitalization approach. The Select Committee's assessment was that there did not appear to be a comprehensive approach to addressing persistent violence and unlawfulness in the taxi industry. The next focus area was on a capable development state, which resorts under the Department of Public Service and Administration. So what I can say in summary is that the Select Committee during its term welcomed the release of the national framework towards the professionalization of the public service, which covers the professionalization of value chain ranging from recruitment and selection all the way to career progression, succession planning, and the management of the career incidents of heads of department. So that was a significant, that framework represents a significant step towards the attainment of a capable development state. The Select Committee also, as one of its, the Select Committee also responded to a number of prevailing occurrences during its term. The vision of Parliament is to represent the people and to ensure government by the people in fulfilling its functions and passing laws. So it's a Parliament that is an activist Parliament and a responsive Parliament, and this requires of Select Committees to also respond to prevailing occurrences. One such occurrence, significant, was the 2020 outbreak of the COVID-19 epidemic. And subsequent to that, the declaration of a national state of disaster and the issuing of regulations promulgated to curb the spread of the virus. Here, the Select Committee played its oversight role by convening a joint meeting with the Select Committees on Public Works and Infrastructure, the Portfolio Committee on Public Works and Infrastructure, pardon me. And the focus of the meeting was, amongst other, the use of state-owned facilities as quarantine centers and the deployment of EPW workers to assist with quarantine sites. Another prevailing occurrence that required the committee's intervention was the public violence, destruction of property and looting that took place during the July 2021 unrest in parts of Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. The committee requested the Minister of Transport to address it on the impact that the unrest had on the transport sector, and the Minister provided an overview of the impact on, amongst other, ports, public transport, infrastructure, service center, and PRASA, and the department also in that engagement set out the recovery plans. A further prevailing occurrence was severe flooding that affected various provinces in the country during April 2020, and the national state of disaster that was subsequently declared because of the magnitude and the severity of the flood. Might be mentioned that although the damage was related to the portfolio of the Select Committee, Parliament had during the previous administration established the Ad Hoc Joint Committee on Flood Disaster Relief and Recovery, and that committee's responsibility included maintaining oversight in respect of the damaged cause and the implementation of response plans. So that was a summary of the focus areas of the previous Select Committee. The previous Select Committee finalized 10 bills during its term. As listed in the table, priority legislation identified by the previous committee was the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, which has subsequently been signed into law or sent to by the President. The bill sought to consolidate the economic regulation of transport within a single framework and policy, to establish the Transport Economic Regulator, to establish the Transport Economic Council, and to make consequential amendments to various other acts. The second priority legislation identified was the Expropriation Bill. The bill is currently awaiting assent by the President. The bill seeks to provide for the expropriation of property for public purpose or in the public interest, to regulate the procedure for the expropriation of properties for public purpose or in the public interest, including payment of compensation, to identify certain instances where the provision of nil compensation may be just and equitable for expropriation in the public interest, and to repeal the Expropriation Act of 1975. The last priority legislation identified was the Railway Safety Bill, which is currently awaiting assent by the President. It provides for the regulation of railway safety in the Republic and for the continued existence of the Railway Safety Regulator, to provide for railway safety permits, to provide for railway safety critical grades and safety management systems, and to provide for national railway safety information and monitoring system, amongst other. There were 3 bills that were referred to the previous Select Committee, but which were not finalized. The first one was the Marine Oil Pollution Bill, which is currently being processed by our Select Committee. The latter 2 bills was the Public Service Amendment Bill and the Public Administration Management Bill, which has now been referred to our sister committee. But it might be necessary to explain to our current Select Committee how the decision was reached to defer those 3 pieces of legislation. The decision was informed by a number of factors, including the fact that the provinces had requested extensions for bills that had been programmed by the Select Committee already. If I may take a step back, so the latter 2 bills were referred to the Select Committee on the 27th of February. Were referred to on the 22nd of February. The reasons why the Select Committee felt that the bills should be referred to the 7th Parliament was that at that point, provinces had already requested bills for extensions for bills that were being programmed by the Select Committee already. And that even the rules, the NCOP rules state that where there's a reasonable request for an extension from a provincial legislature, such an extension should be granted. The further reason was that the public in both the provincial legislature and the NCOP ought to be afforded reasonable time to prepare and submit inputs on the bill, and that failing to do so risks the resultant legislation being set aside by the courts for failing to comply with the constitutional imperatives. The decision by the Select Committee to not continue with the processing of the legislation was referred to the chairperson of the NCOP, who in turn duly informed the speakers of the respective provincial legislatures of the decision. Frankly speaking, members, there might sometimes be a perception that after a bill is introduced in Parliament, the parliamentary processing of the legislation is a rubber stamp process. But when one looks at the highlighted matters that the previous Select Committee identified, it would seem that that is not the case. So that can be illustrated in two ways. The first one was that the National Department of Transport introduced draft regulation 66A, and the Select Committee at that time had concerns about whether the regulations was in line with or conflicted with related South African Development Community treaties. The proposed amendment had the effect that professional driving permits would only be valid when operating a motor registered in the country that issued any such professional driving permit. So if the vehicle is registered in Angola, for example, it would only be valid if the professional driving permit was registered in the same country. Having considered the legal opinion, the committee resolved that the Department of Transport ought to withdraw the draft regulations, which the department then subsequently did. A second illustration is that the President, acting in terms of Section 79(1) of the Constitution, expressed reservations about the constitutionality of certain provisions of Clause 7 of the National Land Transport Amendment Bill. Because of the reservation, the bill was in fact referred back to the National Assembly for consideration. And having been satisfied that the bill before the committee addressed the reservations expressed by the President, the Select Committee resolved to agree to the bill. The reservations essentially related to the possible encroachment on the competency assigned to provinces in respect of the transport planning functions. So this is the first set of issues that the previous Select Committee has recommended for follow-up in the 7th administration. The first one was the introduction of the in terms of the Economic Regulation of Transport Act, a single transport economic regulator is to be established. The Select Committee recommended that the following matters be closely scrutinized once the single transport economic regulator has been established. The first one is reviewing regulations that are to be issued with a specific focus on ensuring that safeguards are put in place in undertaking of market inquiries to address concerns of scope creep and overreach. Second recommendation is that the Select Committee should monitor that as undertaken by the department, that there are no job losses and no other regulators are affected when the Transnet Port Authority becomes a nucleus around which the single transport economic regulator will be established. The third issue is monitoring the finalization of the Memorandum of Understanding between the regulator and the Competition Commission. The Select Committee had inquired as to whether the regulator will not be overlapping functions with the Competition Commission. And the department responded that Clause 43 of the bill requires the regulator to negotiate and conclude an agreement with the Competition Commission to coordinate and harmonize the exercise of jurisdiction over competition matters. Further issues for follow-up suggested is that during the 2022-3 annual report, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure during the consideration of the annual report of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, Infrastructure South Africa indicated that the Infrastructure Development Amendment Bill will make provision for the establishment of Infrastructure South Africa as a public entity. Further, during the processing of the Railway Safety Bill, the Department of Transport responded that several issues raised did not fall under the Railway Safety Bill, but that it would be covered by the provisions of a forthcoming National Rail Bill. These matters include, amongst other, the evolution of rail, theft, malicious damage to property, and other criminal acts that impact on safe railway operations. In addition, the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill was introduced in Parliament in 2023. The follow-up in respect of that would now resort under our sister committee. The next few slides cover oversight visits and study tours that the previous Select Committee undertook. I would like to highlight maybe the focus areas. So the oversight visit was taken to the Gauteng province, and there the focus was on local economic development programs and other development programs such as the extended public works program. So these were oversight visits that were jointly undertaken with our previous sister committee. The focus of the oversight visit to the Western Cape was on special economic zones, taxi violence in the city of Cape Town, and projects implemented by the Department of Public Works and Transport, as well as the public transport interchange in Dunoon. The focus area for the Northern Cape Province oversight visit was assessing how the three spheres of government work together in implementing national priorities in terms of job creation, spurring change in the economic infrastructure, and fostering economic transformation in line with the aspirations of the district development model. The Select Committee also undertook one study tour jointly with the Select Committee on Trade and Industry, Economic Development, Small Business Development, Tourism, Employment and Labour. That would be our former sister committee. Here the focus areas was on the identification of approaches to public infrastructure provision and public transport that address current challenges and imperatives ranging from socioeconomic imperatives to technological imperatives and environmental imperatives. Another focus area for the study tour to Germany was engagement with stakeholders on the identification of approaches to public infrastructure provision. Yes. The Select Committee during its term considered two international instruments. So these international instruments reaches Parliament after it has followed the required processes for concluding and becoming party to treaties at the international bodies and the international law. So the negotiation in terms of the contents of the treaties essentially happen at your international bodies, such as the United Nations. However, Section 231, 2A of the Constitution stipulates that any international agreement binds the Republic only after it has improved by resolution in both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, unless it is an agreement referred to in subsection 3A. So the path would then be from the international body to the Parliament of South Africa. So the previous Select Committee considered the Convention on International Civil Aviation amendments, which it adopted. It also considered the Luxembourg Protocol to the Convention on International Interest in Mobile Equipment on matters specific to a railway rolling stock, which the Select Committee also resolved to adopt. Two international instruments were deferred to the 7th Parliament, as it was tabled for the committee in April 2024, and this committee program could not accommodate it at that point. Those two which were deferred to the 7th Parliament are the Protocol to amend the Convention and offences and certain other acts committed on board aircraft, and the International Convention on Civil Liability for bunkers, oil pollution damage. So one can anticipate that these instruments will again make its way to the Select Committee. So here we will, I will maybe spend a bit more time, as these are the recommendations that the previous Select Committee has referred to the current Select Committee. And as I've indicated, the matters will be taken forward to the extent that the current Select Committee agrees to do so. For the Department of Transport, the recommendations are as follows: that the outcomes of the National Road Safety Strategy Impact Evaluation Study, and that the department, together with the Department of Planning and Monitoring and Evaluation, has commissioned that the Select Committee should keep an eye on the outcomes. Another matter was that the department has reported that the license card production machine is obsolete and prone to breakdowns, and that the department reported that it is in the process of procuring a new machine. The Select Committee previously appealed to the DOT to expedite the implementation of digital driving licenses. Another issue for follow-up is that the department should enhance its efforts to increase the patrol of South Africa's coastal borders, as porous borders allowed for the illicit trade of goods and portrays a negative international image. A second issue identified was that given the burden on the South African road network, the targeted 10%, so that 10% was reflected in the department's annual performance plan for last year, that the targeted 10% for freight moved from rail to rail should be reviewed with the intention of increasing the percentage. As announced during the 2023 State of the Nation address, the Welisiwe Rural Bridges Program is to be implemented in partnership between the Department of Transport and Defence, respectively, in fact, also including the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. The recommendation is that the Select Committee ought to pay particular attention to the rollout of this program, as it allows communities to safely access education opportunities, government services, economic opportunities, and the social infrastructure that allows communities to have sustainable livelihoods. In respect of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, during the last annual report, the Auditor General raised concerns about the credibility of the expanded Public Works Program performance information. And the department then indicated that monitoring, evaluation, and supervision reporting will be put in place so that the number of workers, the deployment areas, task per deployment area, and performance per deployment area can be verified. Further, when the department last appeared before the committee, it was reported that the Parliamentary Villages Board continues to be non-functional and that no financial statements had been submitted to the Auditor General by the board since the year 2013. That was then reported as a recurring challenge, as board members simply did not attend committee meetings, and as a result, quorums could not be reached to make progress on matter. The undertaking was made that as the new chairperson of the board, the DG of the department will escalate this matter. Another issue to recommended for attention is the refurbishment, operate and transfer program that is intended to attract the capacity of the private sector in the forms of capital and skills to assist government in improving the conditions of specific government-owned properties. The department also reported that the medium-term budget policy statement and the Division of Revenue Act now makes provision for provinces to pledge future allocations. So that's the out-year allocations towards accelerating the delivery of social infrastructure. The Northern Cape and Eastern Cape has been identified as the first provinces to utilize this approach, commencing with the completion of business cases for the projects. The last two issues under DPI was that the construction industry is plagued by interests who holds communities and development projects hostage for their own selfish gains. And the Select Committee has appealed to the department to continue with its efforts to address the risks posed by the construction mafia, and that such efforts should complement measures such as the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, that's Act 8 of 2019, which contain important provisions related to the safeguarding of critical infrastructure. During its 2022 engagements, the committee raised concerns about the process to evict persons and demolish illegally constructed houses. Related to this is the unlawful occupation of buildings where occupants live in unsafe conditions. The tragic consequences were seen in the fire that resulted in 73 people being killed in a 5-story building that had been occupied in central Johannesburg. This is all the more concerning if state-owned buildings are occupied, and inaction by government departments and entities mean that eviction proceedings become near impossible without securing alternative accommodation for occupiers. The matters relating to Department of Public Service and Administration, I will skip, as our committee would not have the option of doing follow-up in respect of these. Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. The National Planning Commission reported that an implementation tracking tool is being developed in collaboration with the CSIR, and the tool will be used for monitoring various IDP indicators. Lastly, the 2019 review of the NDP identified that in the absence of a social compact around advancing the NDP, or at least a shared implementation and monitoring framework, it is difficult to account for the contribution or lack thereof of the private sector, organized labor, or civil society. So in addition to the overarching social compact, sector compact should be concluded to guide all social partners in a particular sector. There's also issues for recommendation in respect of the various public entities. In respect of PRASA, the Select Committee's recommendation is that the verification of the localization component of the Kibela manufacturing and supply agreement could not be finalized. So Kibela being the entity that provides the rolling stock. The South African Bureau Standards was appointed to do the verification, but SAPS itself experienced internal management and capacity challenges. The next issue identified for follow-up is that certain of the priority rail corridors are owned by Transnet, and discussions are underway on the possibility of PRASA taking over ownership of the infrastructure on certain of these corridors. Further, PRASA also raised concern that the accident haulage fees that it must pay to Transnet is not sustainable for its mainline passenger services, and that discussions in this regard are underway between the entities. Another issue for follow-up is that Proclamation 153 of 2024 had been issued, in terms of which the President has empowered the SIU to probe certain matters at PRASA. The proclamation covers allegations of unlawful and improper conduct that took place between January 2010 and 16 February 2024. Lastly, in relation to PRASA, the white paper on national rail policy states that the Department of Transport will engage the Minister of Police to strengthen the South African Police Service Railway Police as a dedicated, proactive law enforcement division within the rail setting for both fixed facilities and trains, including the rail infrastructure declared as key national points. The next public entity in respect of which the previous Select Committee has made recommendations is the Road Accident Fund. Shortly after the committee's establishment in 2019, the Select Committee invited RAF to brief the committee on its annual performance plan. At that stage, already the committee raised concern that what was tabled was a draft APP, and that backlogs at the RAF had already been widely reported. The RAF continues to be plagued by governance and financial management challenges, and a concerted oversight intervention strategy should be developed by the 7th Parliament. The National School of Government will resort under our sister committee, the Independent Development Trust. The department reported that it had developed a business case in terms of which the IDT would be self-sufficient, and consultation is underway in this regard. So those were the items that the previous Select Committee has recommended the current Select Committee should focus on. So those items, if approved by the Select Committee, by our Select Committee, will be spread out over the 5-year term of the Select Committee. And then every year when the annual performance plan is adopted, the Select Committee will then apply its mind to the extent to which the previous Select Committees recommendations will be incorporated into our oversight program. The next matter that the Select Committee gave attention to was the state capture report. In November 2022, Parliament set out the implementation plan to oversee the implementation of the President's response to the recommendations of the state capture report. The following matters were referred to the Select Committee in the 6th Administration. Now, the matters was referred to the 6th Parliament Select Committee because the responsibility to implement the executive undertaking for these listed matters was assigned to the Department of Public Service and Administration. So these would now also resort under the sister committee. Those were the review of public sector legislation and alignment with the national framework, the development of a code of conduct for special advisors, an induction for new members to clarify the relationship between the political authority and institutions they oversee, and revision to relevant sections of the ministerial handbook. So the previous Select Committee already started with its oversight in respect of the State Capture Commission, which will be taken further by our sister committee. Okay, so there were two overarching recommendations that the previous Select Committee made. The first one relates to the Public Service Commission, which will be considered by a sister committee. But essentially, the recommendation is that during the previous administration, the tendency was for the Select Committee or the Portfolio Committee, in whose portfolio the Department of Public Service and Administration fell, that it was essentially only those committees who engaged with the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission's recommendation, which was agreed to by the Select Committee, was that actually the Public Service Commission is a commission that is to the benefit of all of the committees of Parliament. And that should, for example, the Public Service Commission do an assessment of frontline services at the Department of Home Affairs, that the Select Committee, in whose portfolio the Department of Home Affairs falls, would benefit from engagement with the Public Service Commission. The next overarching recommendation was that the Select Committee should develop conducive working ties with specialist bodies, such as academic institutions. So that recommendation to Select Committees is already incorporated into the accountability and oversight model of Parliament. In implementing this, the previous Select Committee, for example, invited the UCT Department of Private Law to host a workshop on property law during its consideration of the expropriation bill. Also, when the Select Committee went on its study tour engagements in Germany, it engaged with the United Nations Innovation Technology Accelerator for Cities to get the academic and research perspective on planning instruments for governments. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, honourable members. That was a handful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. It seems that the previous administration has left us quite a bit of homework. Dr. Clark, are you happy to take questions for clarification? I know you can't answer specifics with regards to individual issues, but if there's any questions for clarification from the members' side, I'll allow for that now. Members, just by show of hands, please. Okay, I don't see any hands. Yeah, there's one. Okay, now we can see some hands. Okay, we'll start with Honourable Skeerkogel. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I guess it's all questions that Dr. Clark will probably just answer later. I don't think she will be able to answer now. Just my first question regarding the PNCE. They said that they submitted the immovable asset register to the AG late. Do we know why did that happen? Then the next one, I didn't really see the report. How successful was that? You know, what my notes is this. It was the short term for that ethic PAIP. And then the next question is, what we had the Department of Justice with us previously, but what actions did they take to address? You mentioned in the report there was over 40,000 people that couldn't get there, doesn't have the operating license, so they can't qualify for the capitalization. But has the Department of Justice did anything to assist members with that? And then my last question is that proclamation of 153 by the President to investigate Plaza. Do we have any progress on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Skeerkogel. Dr. Clark, just confirm for me that you get those questions, because he wasn't really very audible on my side, but I don't know, maybe you've picked up the questions?
Yes, Chair, I got 3 of the questions. I would ask Dr. Skeerkogel to just repeat the 4th one. So maybe if I can respond to the ones that I did hear, Chairperson.
That's
So
good, thank you.
yes. So exactly the type of questions Dr. Skeerkogel has now asked would be matters that our select committee takes further in response to the recommendations of the previous select committee. So I can start, for example, with the question of the operating licenses. So the department's response was to then extend the deadline for the scrapping of illegally converted taxis. So this was a matter that was also raised when the department appeared before the select committee for its introductory briefing session. And there the department, in response to that, the department submitted documentation on what they call the downward stream projects that is being implemented in respect of the taxi industry, which sets out the steps that the department has taken to support operators during the process of both establishing the vehicle operating companies and also assistance provided to taxi operators in ensuring that they are able to form part of the recapitalization project. So that has the follow-up briefing for the department, from the department in respect of that process is scheduled for next year, pending the adoption by the select committee of that part of the committee program. Then there was a question of the late submission of the asset register. At the time, the department reported that there were basically 2 reasons. The first one was the capacity of the client departments to actually finalize the registering of the actual properties on the deeds register. So the department had both engaged with the client departments, and if I recall correctly, it was particularly the South African Police Service, but it had also been engaging with the Department of Rural Development, that's the custodian, to also see what service level agreements can be put in place between the departments to ensure that the asset register is updated as and when properties are completed and handed over to the client departments. That's the 2 I could get, Dr. Skeerkogel.
Dr. Skeerkogel, do you want to repeat the questions that Dr. Clark didn't answer now, because you weren't very audible? Sorry. You must maybe speak closer to your microphone.
All right. Chair, what was the first question she answered? Because I was just thrown off. Which questions did you answer? The first one, Dr. Clark?
Yes. I answered the question of the operating licenses and how that impeded the recapitalization process and the late submission of the asset register.
Okay, I'll just ask the one question. The other 2 also put you in writing. The proclamation of 153 of 2024 that the President did into Plaza. Do we have a progress report on that, or is that report finished? Where would we be able to access that report?
My answer, Chair?
Yeah, you're welcome to answer,
Oh.
Dr. Clark. Thank you.
Yes. I'm not yet. I will do the necessary inquiries, Dr. Skerkogel, to identify how far the process is. And it has been practiced that the select committee waits for the SIU process to be concluded before requesting briefings on the outcomes and findings and recommendations. So that will also can then also be included into the select committee annual report for the next year or the year in which the report is finalized.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clark. You covered, Dr. Skerkogel?
Yes, I'm covered. Thank you, Chair.
Right, great. Thank you very much. Honorable Makasini, your hand. I see your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to check on the issue of scrapping of the illegal converted, because they were the presentation is saying they will have to relook in 2025. If they are not relooking, are we able as a committee to come with the legislation so that it can be part of the bills on our legacy? Because this process has been here for a long time. Then secondly, the issue of, I didn't get you, Doctor, you said there are 3 things that were supposed to be processed by this committee that were recommended by the administration, by the previous administration. I only heard you when you're talking about the marine oil pollution and the monitoring. What was the third one? Because I didn't get you when you say the only things that we need to process. Can you just give me the third one, because I didn't get you? It was a single transport of economic regulation and the monitoring. What was the third one? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Makasini. Dr. Clark, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. So, should it get to the deadline for the 2025 scrapping of illegally converted taxi vans, that would be the stage at which the committee considers what form its oversight would then continue to take going forward. And as Honorable Makasini said, that could include liaising with our legal services or even with experts in the industry to identify, is there possibly a legislative solution, either by way of regulations or by way of amending existing legislation to provide support, what do we call it, supporting mechanisms for actually ensuring that the scrapping of the taxi vans are in fact concluded. So that is the oversight we will then, that will be the type of thing we include in our annual performance plan for 2025, 2026. On the items identified for follow-up, it was the Economic Regulation of Transport Act. Then it was the Infrastructure South Africa Amendment Bill. The Railway Safety Bill that will include issues including devolution of rail, theft, malicious damage to property, and other criminal acts. So it's the Railway Safety Bill, Member Makasini, that was not in the list. The Public Service Commission Amendment Bill, that would now fall under our sister committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Are you covered, Honorable Makasini?
Yes, Chair, I'm covered. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Honorable Moyimang, you're welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to yourself and the colleagues on the platform and the committee management team. Just one question from my side. Of course, affirming the importance of this presentation in charting the way forward for the 7th administration. The question that I just wanted to check with yourself, Chair, and the team, I suspect in relation to that proclamation, it might be a need, probably maybe for the team, the content advisor, Dr. Clark, maybe just to at some point maybe just give the committee a briefing on the the SAA. Maybe just one day, just a briefing on that, so that we then appreciate the angle from where the rationale behind the proclamation.
Honorable Moimang, you disappeared, I think, halfway through your question. If you don't just praise your question, summarize it for me and just ask it again, just so we can get the gist of it, please.
Yes, is it possible for the team to do maybe a presentation on the state capture finding on PRAZA, so that the committee understand the rationale behind the proclamation and what to expect from the SIU work as a result of the proclamation? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I've got that. Thank you very, very much. It's a good question. Dr. Clark, you're welcome to answer, but I think that's more a request that we surely could adhere to in one of our future meetings.
Yes, Chairperson. My suggestion would be to include that in our annual performance plan for 2015-16. So at the earliest, from May onwards next year.
Great, thank you very much. Honorable Makasini and Honorable Moimang, your hands are still up. Are those legacy hands?
Legacy and apologies.
Okay, thank you. I think just from my side, Dr. Clark, thank you very much for this, the compilation of this report and for presenting it to us. I think one of the main takeaways from this is that this document will become an extremely important document for all the members of our committee. As every time one of these departments appear in front of us, this could be a reference document to continue with our oversight as we go along through the 7th Parliament. So my suggestion would be to our members to keep this document at hand for all our meetings going in the future, because you never know when something will pop up that is a legacy issue that we could then highlight and inquire and do oversight over. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Clark, can we move on to the presentation on the annual performance plan of our select committee, please? Are you going to do it, Mr. Ntlini?
Chairperson?
Yes, sir.
Before we move to the next item, we need to table this report, the legacy report, for adoption by the committee.
Mr. Ntlini, do we have a quorum? Do we need a quorum?
Yes, we do have a quorum, Chair.
Great. Honorable members, can I get a proposer for this report, please? Thank you, Honorable Skeerkogel. If I can get a seconder, please. Thank you, Honorable Molokome. Report is duly adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ntlini. Thank you for reminding me. Honorable Clark, Dr. Clark, are you ready to do the presentation on our annual performance plan, please?
Yes, I am, Chairperson.
Thank
Thank you for the opportunity to myself and Mr. Ntlini to present the draft annual performance plan for the committee. The purpose of the annual performance plan is to direct the select committee's focus for a particular financial year, in this case being the 2024-2025 financial year. So it essentially represents the committee's proactive identification of its oversight program for this financial year. Having said that, Chairperson and honorable members, members will recall that when I dealt with the legacy report, I reminded members of the vision of Parliament, which is to be an activist and responsive Parliament. So what that means is we will have, once adopted, we will have an annual performance plan for the year. But definitely as matters arise during the year, as issues surface, as the interests of provinces need to be taken into consideration during the year, the activities and objectives in the annual performance plan will then expand to keep up to date and to reflect the prevailing occurrences in the country that relates to our portfolio. So with that introduction, Honorable Chairperson and members, what I present now is the Select Committee's annual performance plan. We will look at the vision, mission, and values of Parliament, where the mandate of our committee originates from, the situation and analysis that informs the objectives of the annual performance plan, and then we'll stand still at the objectives and activities for the 2014-15 financial year. So the vision of Parliament is an activist and responsive people's parliament that improves the quality of life of South Africans and ensures enduring equality in our society. Its mission is to represent the people and to ensure government by the people in fulfilling its constitutional functions of passing laws and overseeing executive action. The values of Parliament is openness, responsiveness, accountability, teamwork, professionalism, integrity, and mutual respect. So the mandate of the Select Committee originates from the mandate of Parliament, which is derived from the Constitution, which establishes Parliament and setting out its functions. Parliament's role and outcomes are to represent the people and ensure government by the people under the Constitution, as well as to represent the provinces and local government in the national sphere of government. So Section 42(4) of the Constitution hones in on the National Council of Provinces and its mandate to represent the provinces and to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government. The NCOP does this mainly by participating in the national legislative process and by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues affecting the provinces. In respect of the mandate of the Select Committee, parliamentary committees are mandated to process and pass legislation and facilitate public participation in Parliament relating to issues of oversight and legislation. They must further monitor the financial and non-financial performance of government departments and their entities to ensure that national objectives are met. The portfolio of the Select Committee on Public Infrastructure and Ministry in the Presidency includes the following: the Department of Transport, together with public entities that report to the Minister of Transport, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, together with the entities that report to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, who are the custodians of the National Development Plan. There's two transitional matters that I would like to bring to the attention of the committee. The first one has been reflected on already, and that being that the Department of Public Service and Administration, together with the CPSI and National School of Government, as well as the Public Service Commission, no longer resorts under this committee in the 7th Parliament, and it now resorts under the Select Committee on Cooperative Governance and Public Administration. Another transitional aspect to take into consideration is that South African Airways and Transnet are new additions to the Select Committee's portfolio. The entities previously reported to the Minister of Public Enterprises. The President ever issued Proclamation Notice 176 of 2024, in terms of which the administration and powers and functions associated with Transnet and SAA have now been entrusted to the Minister of Transport. The Minister responsible for planning, monitoring and evaluation has been appointed as executive authority for the Department of Public Enterprises, and DPE will continue to exist until the human and financial resources are transferred appropriately. So the recommendation here is to allow the transitional measures within the department. So the transitional measures between DPE and the Department of Transport, and the transitional measures between the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation and the Minister of Transport as well. The recommendation is to allow those transitional measures to be completed for the remainder of this financial year. So what members will see is that the annual report for our committee for 2014-15 does not yet touch on South African Airways and Transnet. So it will be at the beginning of our next annual performance plan that we will schedule the recommendation is we schedule the introductory briefing with SAA and Transnet, and we will then commence with including SAA and Transnet into our committee program through the consideration of their 5-year strategic plans, 2025-26 budgets, and the 2025-26 annual performance plan. So in developing the objectives for the Select Committee annual performance plan, a situational analysis was undertaken. So it's a situational analysis together with the legacy report of the previous Select Committee that our committee has just adopted now in taking forward the recommendations set out therein. The below situational analysis also informs the areas of our Select Committee's oversight program. The first one is the macro framework for the 7th Parliament. So the annual performance plan of Parliament for the 2024-2025 sets out objectives and targets to be completed in pursuit of the framework. And the following strategic themes are outlined in that 2024-2025 framework. Ensuring a transformative Parliament to drive and attain the national development outcomes as reflected in the National Development Plan. Being a responsive Parliament that addresses the shortcomings of Parliament as pointed out by civil society and the Commission on State Capture. A caring Parliament that puts the needs and well-being of people first, protecting their vulnerabilities. A Parliament that intervenes, protects, promotes, and reaffirms every person's right as set out in the Constitution. Collaborative engagement to form new partnerships to harness the strength of combined effort. Engagement with stakeholders to meet expectations and needs of South Africans, and operational excellence, ensuring a more effective and efficient institution. So it is now up to our Select Committee to operationalize its mandate and the framework for the 7th Parliament against the backdrop of several policy objectives that direct government and stakeholders in the country. So at the regional level, there's the African Union Agenda 2063 key transformative outcomes that envisages an integrated Africa with movement of goods, services, and capitals, which requires coordination in certain aspects of the transportation network. The SADC Regional Infrastructure Development Plan identifies key preconditions for success, which include, amongst other, appropriate policy, institutional, and regulatory frameworks, availability of a pipeline of bankable projects, and the adoption of the user-pay principle with cost-reflective tariffs. These preconditions are reflected in key policies such as the South African White Paper on Rail Policy and the National Infrastructure Plan. The departments and entities falling within the Portfolio Committee have also set out key strategic objectives in its key policy documents. For DPME, that includes the policy framework for government-wide monitoring and evaluations. For Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, this includes the National Infrastructure Plan. And for the Department of Transport, this includes the National Road Safety Strategy. So in addition to the analysis, the objectives set out in those strategic policies, on 18 July 2024, the President delivered the opening of Parliament address. And that address touched on a number of themes that fall within the portfolio of our Select Committee. This includes the need to invest in public infrastructure in underserviced areas and to forge a new inclusive growth path for South Africa by pursuing a massive investment in infrastructure. The commitment was also made to considerably increase the scale of investment in infrastructure, positioning South Africa as a central institution of coordinating infrastructure, South Africa, my apologies, as a central institution of coordinating and planning. A clear intention was also set to transform South Africa into a construction site and to drive inclusive growth through the revitalization of the rail network and improvement of the operational performance of ports. It was also acknowledged that transport accounts for a large proportion of household incomes, and an immediate priority will be to complete the recovery of the passenger rail network across the country to enable people to travel from outlying areas to city centers. So the next step the committee must take is to identify objectives and activities for the 2024-2025 financial year. So members have seen that there's a fair amount of recommendations that the previous Select Committee has left for us. We have 3 departments and in total 19 public entities reporting to those departments. So the purpose of the objectives and activities table is to identify among those myriad of options and departments and public entities, which are the issues that the Select Committee will focus on for the 2024-2025 financial year. And we've essentially already lost one term. The opening of Parliament was on the 18th of July. Term 2 will be July to September. Term 3 is October to December. And term 4 is January to March 2025. So the proposed aims and objectives for this Select Committee for its inaugural year. The first one is member induction to the Select Committee portfolio departments and public entities. And with the conclusion of the presentation of its legacy report today, those activities have actually already been met. So introductory sessions have already been held with the Department of Transport, Public Works and Infrastructure, Planning and Monitoring, under term 2, and this term being the presentation on the 6th Parliament Legacy Report. The second aim of objective is oversight over departmental strategic planning, budgeting, and implementation. Here, the first activity has already also been concluded. We considered the 2024-2025 annual performance plan and budget of the Department of Transport, as well as the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. The same process will be repeated for the 2025-2026 annual performance plan, but that will only happen in term 4. So that will be your January to March 2025. More closer to home this term will be the consideration of annual reports. So this is where departments report against the targets they have set for themselves for this year. Looking at the recommendations of the previous committee, plus the situation analysis, the recommendation is that the department consider the annual report of the Department of Transport together with PRASA, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure together with the Independent Development Trust and the Construction Industry Development Board, as well as the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. So that will then take place in term 3, the term that we are now in. In respect of the processing of legislation, the committee will continue with the processing of the Marine Oil Pollution Bill. That will be taken further in term 4 next year. Another proposed focus area is oversight in respect of the provision of social infrastructure. And so here we've already received a briefing by the Property Management Trading Entity on the PTME optimization strategy and data analysis during the previous term. We also undertook oversight visits to KwaZulu-Natal social infrastructure during term 3 during our recent oversight visit. The next proposed focus area is oversight in respect of the implementation of integrated transport planning. Pardon me. The recommendation is in term 4, we receive a briefing by the Department of Transport on progress on the implementation of the IPTE network across provinces and not limited to just KwaZulu-Natal as in our previous oversight visit. We have already done an oversight visit to the IPTN project in Durban. So that's finalized in term 3. We've also done the oversight visit to Durban Port, which we finalized in term 3. There's a recommendation that the Select Committee attend the Transport Evolution Africa Strategic Conference, which will take place in term 4. And this is to allow the committee to get independent and expert input and presentations on integrated transport planning. The conference will take place in Johannesburg, and key topics and focus areas are the collaborative efforts for enhancing cross-border integration and trade escalation. So that aligns very much with the SADC priorities I've just outlined. And further topics will include key investment strategies in port, rail, road, and aviation through public-private partnerships and new approaches to financing transport infrastructure projects. Conferences like this is important as it also allows the Select Committee to identify proposals and not necessarily only be responsive to legislative instruments or policies or proposals that is being recommended by the departments within our portfolios. So that is recommended for term 4. Also recommended for term 4 is briefing by PRASA on the revitalization of rail corridors and progress on the implementation of the station modernization program. Also identified for term 4 is oversight visits to station modernization program projects. So these are the items that have been identified for our current financial year, Chairperson and honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Thank you very much for the well-researched and well-presented draft annual performance plan. Honourable members, this is a draft performance plan for our current financial year, ending in 2025. Are there any questions or comments for clarity? I don't see any hands. In that case, Dr. Clark, just from my side, thank you very much for including the Gallagher Convention Centre, the attendance to the Transport Evolution Africa Strategic Conference. I think it's really important that we as a new committee get as much background information as possible. So I strongly support that, if I may, from the chair side. And then the rest of the draft plan has a really good mix of some of the legacy issues of the 6th Parliament and some of the new issues that we are tackling. So yeah, it looks like a very good program, but I'd leave it over to the committee. Committee members, can I have a proposal? Seeing as there's no further discussion, can I have a proposal for this performance plan, please?
Just one addition, Honorable Chair, my apology.
Oh, Honorable Moiman, I've got you down.
Yes,
No problem.
Yeah, I see, in terms of conference, I see the CIDB conference, which is an entity of one of Public Works. They have a conference on the 19th of November. I thought maybe we could add that and then make a follow-up. The committee secretary can make a follow-up, probably with the department and the entity, because I believe that it's quite critical also as an entity that we oversight. That's just that point. Other than that, I move that we adopt the draft APP. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Moimang. As a matter of fact, I've already spoken to the Office of the Minister, and it seems that it's by invitation only. So I'm trying to arrange invitation for the committee at this stage. Dr. Clark, will it be possible to include that then in this annual performance plan?
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, great. So with that amendment, can I then ask for a proposal? Dr. Honourable Brett, have you got a question?
No, I want to move.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. So we've got a mover for the performance plan. Can we get a seconder, please? Honourable Skeerkogel, thank you very much. Colleagues, thank you for your cooperation and your attention. That just takes us to the last agenda item for today, the consideration of the minutes of our meeting on the 9th of October. You've received a set of these minutes. The agenda was the briefing by the Department of Transport on the Marine Oil Pollution Preparedness, Response and Cooperation Bill. Can we flight the minutes, please? Thank you very much. There's the attendance on page 1. I'll just go through it page by page. If there's any questions, queries, corrections, please raise your hands. Page 2. Page 3. Quite a bit of deliberations and questions from the members, which is good. And then page 4, we adjourn that meeting at 12 o'clock. Could I have a proposer, if there's no questions or queries, proposer for the minutes, please? Is it true reflection of that meeting? Thank you, Honorable Brett. Seconder, please. Thank you, Honorable Molokome. Colleagues, thank you very much. That then takes care of the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. That leaves us with closure. Thank you very much for your attendance today. I think we got through a whole lot of work. I'd like to thank Dr. Clark and Mr. Mtelini for presentation and drafting of these plans and the legacy report, which I think will stand us in good stead for the remainder of this year. With that, I'd then like to declare this meeting closed and adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.
Thanks, Chair. Goodbye, colleagues.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.